Hij was bevriend met de Beatles en onderhoudt goede relaties met prins Charles. Toen zijn Song for Athene op de begrafenis van prinses Diana werd gespeeld, maakte hem dat bekend bij een groot publiek. Wij zochten deze componist op in Dorset, aan de zuidkust van Engeland, waar hij woont en werkt. Sir John Tavener. Sir John Tavener, you are a composer whose music speaks to the spiritual side of your listeners. But I wonder, when did you first get into contact with your spiritual side as a child?
I remember at the age of 3, when my mother was away giving birth to my brother, that we had an old gramophone and I used to play the same music again and again and again and again. And it is through music that I think I perceive the divine world. So at the age of 3, really, I think.
What are your best childhood memories?
As a 3-year-old, I remember I had a very musical grandfather, and he would always act as an audience. And I used to improvise on the piano when I was 3 and 4. I would improvise the sound of storms, the sound of rain, and he would always act as an audience by applauding me. I recall that very vividly. As I remember, also recall very vividly being taken to concerts of Indian music by my mother, because she loved things Indian, and that stayed with me all my life. And my father used to take me to the Bach Passions of St. Matthew Passions and John Passions. So I had this, I was really formed by Mozart, by Bach, and by Indian music.
When did you discover for the first time that the world was not as beautiful as you had expected as a child?
I think when the world started to intrude, when I realized that one had to make a living from this kind of thing, when I found that I didn't really like the world, I didn't like the way the world was, and it was the intrusion of the world, yes.
The intrusion of the material world?
Of the material world. What I can now describe as Maya, the aspect, the Hindu word Maya, the world of appearance, all this world. Particularly, I think, when I started to receive public attention, when in my late teens, when music was performed, and then there was the whole nonsense of becoming a public figure, and I didn't enjoy that, and I still don't enjoy it.
Why not?
Always for me the act of composing has been like prayer, and when this prayer is actually transmitted to many people. Of course, I'm very happy that the music communicates to people, but I actually would rather not be there. So going to concerts for me of my music has always been hell for me. I'd much rather not be there. But to attend rehearsals, that's fine, but not to have an audience. Particularly, I think, because I've never really got on with the concept of concert. It doesn't sit well with me. I prefer if my music is performed in sacred spaces, whether they be cathedrals, churches, or I've had music performed in Ephesus and other places, in sacred sites in Greece, where I'm much more happy, because the modern concert hall is a product of modernism.
How then, when the Beatles recorded your dramatic cantata The Whale on their Apple label, well, it must have been it was a big success. But what was the influence of that success, that early in life? You were 24, I think?
Yes. Well, I think that fundamentally I was very unhappy with the state of classical modern music at that time, where it seemed to be a pure activity of the brain. Music was composed and calculated, and it made no connection with an audience. And I've never particularly loved pop music, but if I had to choose between the extremely intellectual music that was being written and performed at Darmstadt, for instance, and the Beatles, I would have chosen the Beatles or Andy Newman or any other, because at least there seemed to be something coming from the heart, which I didn't hear in any of the contemporary music that I heard.
What contemporary music are you thinking about?
People like Stockhausen, Boulez, the whole Viennese school, which never has touched me at all, Albenberg, Schoenberg.
Then again, you stand out as a composer who wants to express the sacred in music.
What motivates me to compose is always a metaphysical truth or a perennial truth of some kind. There's no reason, I would never want to write. For instance, I'll give you an example. When Stephen Isserlis rang me up, the cellist, if he'd rung up and asked me to write a cello concerto, I would have said no, I'm not interested in writing concert music. But he said, I love the sound of Orthodox church music. I want you to write a piece that's inspired by that. So immediately I was interested in the concept, because I mean, I think it's not a Western view that music can become the sound of God. It's an Eastern view. I mean, the Indians have this sense of it. The Sufis have this sense of it. We've up to a point in the West lost that, I think, and there is a certain degree to which I would agree with the French philosopher René Guénon when he says that music went in a downward path after Gregorian chant. I think that's very extreme, and I don't actually agree totally with him at all. But I think that needed to be said, something like that needed to be said.
What you're actually saying is that there is a disconnection between music and religion in our times.
I'm saying exactly that, yes.
Why is it? Why has it become like that?
I think because since the Renaissance, the ego came into music. And once the ego is present, the satanic presence there's going to be. And then it becomes the whole concept of the romanticizing of the artist. Someone like Dante, for instance, I mean, he wrote in order to save his soul, and one doesn't see that anymore, I don't think. And I lament that, because I think I do write in order to save my soul. I think there are certain parts of the Orthodox Church, the Coptic Orthodox Church, where you're not allowed to take communion unless you are a young baby or a very old person. And I think Christianity has lost this, what I would call initiatic sense, and that communion has become very commonplace, and in a sense has lost its mystery. I think lost its power even. I think it's even more. It's a great pity that Christianity has never formed a more esoteric group like Sufism in Islam, which
the
is
mystics in Christianity.
Of course, the mystics
Saint
also.
John of the Cross,
yes,
Dionysius.
of course, and even Saint Therese of Lisieux, who I was very devoted to, and wrote an opera about her when I was 20, 23, 24, 25, which was done. Yeah.
So this sense of, in a certain way, is it correct if I say that you lament the loss of mysticism in Christianity?
Yes, and also its esoteric and initiatic character, because I do really believe that the early church was initiatic, and it was never meant that it should be globalized in the way that it is. But I can't give an answer. I mean, somebody has to protect the truths of Christianity, so maybe there has to be a church. But I feel more and more that religion is something that happens inside, in the heart. And recently, the difficult situation, because I have young children, I feel the need to go to church less and less, because for me it's inside. But then my children are young, and it's necessary for them, I think, to go to church. But it means less and less to me.
Why is it necessary for your children to send them to church then?
Because I want them to have some kind of basis, some kind of basis in life. I can't explain to my children about inwardness in the way that I could to you, for instance. I think that they might not understand it, but maybe they will.
Do they go to the Orthodox Church, Protestant Church?
In our house, in the stable, we have a little chapel, and we have services there, not very often, but maybe 5-6 times a year, and I think that's very precious. And they love the services. They always want more, so that's good, I think.
Do you pray together with your children then?
Not in a sort of formal way. I think both my children probably kiss the icon before they go to bed, but there's no formal prayer, no. There's a sort of sacredness about, and a mystery in Orthodoxy, which I used to find in the Catholic Church and still do, when, for instance, they perform the Latin, when they celebrate the Latin Mass on Maundy Thursday in the evening, when the sacrament is actually carried in procession. That was one of the most moving experiences of my life when I saw that before Vatican II. It was quite extraordinary, and I went recently to a service that had this taking away of the sacrament, it had. I was in floods of tears at that moment. It's a mixture of the musical situation and what is actually going on. The priest is carrying the Blessed Sacrament, and he's putting it in the chapel on the side. And it's the most deeply symbolic. I think there's no service even in Orthodoxy that compares with the shattering experience of this.
You wrote a lot of beautiful hymns to Mother Mary at Theotokos. What does she mean to you? What does the image of Mother Mary, the Virgin, mean to you?
I almost can't explain what the Blessed Virgin or what Mary means to me and how important I think she is. But I think it's something to do with the hidden nature of her existence, the fact that she became what she became after she'd been assumed into heaven. That she's such a colossal force. It's in icons and in the Catholic Church too. I mean, you see weeping icons of the Virgin, pure in the true sense of the word. And I also think, but this is a reflection on why I love her so much, is that the feminine is so lacking in this sort of cockeyed masculine culture that we live in.
The protecting veil, what does the title refer to?
The Mother of God in Istanbul, what is now Istanbul, Constantinople then, appeared to be protecting. She appeared in the sky and was appearing to protect the Saracen army that was attacking. And this is the exoteric meaning of it. But that she casts her veil round us, and to invoke her name is up to a point. I invoke her name at various points, and she always appears to protect, because the essence of the Virgin is that the Virgin attracts, and as mother, as Virgin she attracts, as mother she comforts and protects. It's the two aspects. One is drawn because she is virgin, one is she protects because she's mother.
What moved me was, I think like many other people, at the end of the funeral of Princess Diana, the beautiful song for Athene.
Mm-hmm.
Alleluia, may flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
Yes.
Were you there at the funeral?
I was there at the funeral. It wasn't inspired by Princess Diana. It was inspired by a Greek girl who had a cycling accident. And this music appeared to come to me when I was actually at the Orthodox funeral. And then the choirmaster of Westminster Abbey rang me up and said that he was doing the funeral of Princess Diana. Was there a piece of music by me that I would like to have included? And I immediately thought, because Princess Diana also was young and she was killed in an accident like Athene, I suggested that he use Song for Athene, and it was entirely because of him, Martin Neri, that was performed at the procession of the coffin outside towards the door. So I was very happy that music existed. That seemed to have an effect on so many people. Death often has brought music from me. And it's a mystery. I don't know where it comes from. It seems to come from the dead person in a kind of way, even people I don't know. I didn't know the Princess of Wales. I know her husband and have a very good friendship with him, but I didn't know her. So in a way, it appears. Often it's a gift from the departing soul of the person. That's how it seems to me.
Mm-hmm. The text from this song for Athene is taken from Orthodoxy?
Well, it's a mixture of Orthodox and Shakespeare. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest is Shakespeare. And then the rest of it is taken from the Orthodox funeral service.
Death is an important theme in your work. Why is that? Why are you fascinated by the mystery of death?
When I was younger, there was a considerable fear of death, and one of the first pieces that were performed in public was based on Donne's sonnets, which were very much concerned with death, and then many other pieces that I wrote throughout my life either bear the title Requiem or whatever. The most recent Requiem is actually a Universalist Requiem, and is a much more ecstatic Requiem, because it's almost as if the fear has, in the music anyway, has taken to a kind of rapture at the idea of death. I think it's true that when Cardinal Hume died, not when he died, when he told his ex-prior at the monastery that he was at, he rang up and said, "I have cancer and I'm dying." And then the prior said, "How wonderful." And I understand that now. Well, I wouldn't have understood it when I was much younger.
How do you understand it? What does it mean to you?
Well, in the sort of way, I don't believe there is such a thing as death. I think that it's a kind of course there is, physically and all the rest of it, but there is, the eastern part of me tends to see the world as somewhat illusory, not partially, but partially illusory. And the reality for me is through music, is through receiving the sacrament, that those things are real. If one really believes that those things are real, and not everything else is illusion, but there's an element of illusion. The ego is an illusion. And there's a wonderful French perennialist Catholic philosopher, poet, etc., who said to me once, end your life with a spelling mistake. I dies.
Yes. It's what St. Paul says, when I die,
yes,
but Christ lives in me.
Christ lives in me, yes. It's the same. Yeah.
You wrote beautiful musical commemorations of your mother, your father. There is a difference in tone, however. With your father, depart in peace, you do some wonderful things with the word Alleluia.
Yes. I think I was so devastated by the death of my mother, and was, and that produced a different kind of peace altogether. With my father, I think that I'd sort of grown a bit, perhaps spiritually, and was able to cope with the situation and saw it as a kind of peace. And he'd lived quite a long life. With my mother, it wasn't so long. Yes, there's a different tone between it.
Your view about death changed, but at first, when your mother died, what feeling did this provoke? How did she die?
She died of cancer. I felt enormously privileged to be there when she actually died. I also felt extremely grateful, profoundly grateful to the Orthodox priest. She wasn't an Orthodox Christian at all, but I'd rung him because the nurses had told me that they thought she was probably dying, and he came immediately to the hospital, and he said the prayers for the parting of the soul from the body. And at the exact moment of her death, he got to the end of the service, and the final Amen coincided exactly with her death. So this was for me a huge grace. I mean, and one felt, I remember telling this to a Greek friend of mine, and he said, "This means your mother is totally safe." It's very, anyway, it meant a great deal to me at the time. After her death, I remember going to the Greek island of Aegina, and I stopped writing for a very long time. Maybe I didn't write for about 6 months. Even though I had told her that I was going to write a piece in her memory, or she'd understood that from a telephone conversation I had in her room. And I'd even rung up the Greek bookshop, asking if they had a copy of the poetry of Calvos, because that's what I actually wrote in her memory. But it did. I did spend a lot of time just purely contemplating, walking around this island in Greece, and going and put my head on the relics of Saint Nectarius in the monastery. When I touched my head to the relics, I heard an inner voice say to me, where your heart is, there is your treasure also, which is from the Gospels.
What did you understand by that?
Again, it transmitted a kind of comfort to me, and that everything was all right, really, and that I didn't need. And then after that, I was able to write again. So it released it released me from this block that had come about by my mother's death.
Music and religion, can they exist separately for you?
No, I think that's true. No, that's true. I think that the two are totally linked. I don't think they could. I mean, I think music. Well, St. Augustine did say that music was a way of knowing God. So I think, for me, that's true.
Do we need beauty to save the world, as Dostoevsky
Yes,
put it?
I was thinking of that. I think Dostoevsky hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, I agree. Yes, I think when he said beauty saves the world, that's absolutely true.
And do you want to express beauty by your music, or is it a side effect, or is it conscious?
I don't think it's conscious. I mean, I just... that's how it comes out, I think. I've never felt the need to express ugliness. I don't think.
Like in modernity.
Like in modernity, which is full of it. And many people seem to like it. I think that people like, because I think it's I'm very lucky, and I say this with great humility, that, you know, people who have ghastly lives with unspeakably awful jobs, and maybe they do see the world as ugly, and I understand it. I'm very lucky. I live in two very beautiful places. I live in the heart of the country in Dorset. I live in a very beautiful place in Greece. I mean, I have consciously surrounded myself with beauty. But then I think, you know, it's not the people's fault who have boring jobs and have to live in cities. That's not the point. It's not their fault. It's the way society has gone.
Sir John,
Yes.
What is your worldview?
I think, to put it very simply, the world is perfect. It's up to us to adjust to that, to see it as perfect. It was created by God and it's perfect. It's man who wants to destroy it for some extraordinary reason. I think it's adjusting how every individual in their own ways must adjust to the fact that the world is perfect, and they must know that that is the case.
What's your image of God?
We are the image of God. I mean, we are made in the image of God, and that's what I mean by adjusting to the fact that the world is perfect. because we're made in the image of God, we actually are God. It's a realization of the fact that we are. I mean, it's the same in all traditions. This is where they really do meet. In Hinduism, it's aham asmi, I am that. In Islam, it's al-Halaj's words, an al-haq, I am the truth. It's in Christianity, of course, Christ says, "Ego mio on." I am I am the divine being. It's a question of all of us realizing that we are in ourselves the divine being. There's a wonderful Sufi saying: when you look at the world and the universe, one feels like a blip, but then when you look into yourself, you realize that the universe and the world is only a blip, and the whole, there's a vast universe inside yourself.
Sir John, who are you, really, behind the surface, behind all veils?
I don't think I'll know that until I die.
So, if you die and you meet
I believe then, I think
being?
I believe that when you die, you don't go into a state of unconsciousness, rather the opposite, that you, for the first time, know who you are, totally. Does that make sense?
Very much so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir John Tavener, for this interview.
Thank you.